The Pontiac Silverdome cost $55.7 million to build. It was sold for $583,000. That's roughly 1 cent for every dollar taxpayers spent putting it up. And the man who bought it, he forgot he'd even placed the bid. In November 2009, a Greek-Canadian real estate developer named Andreas Apostolopoulos was on vacation in Greece when one of his sons called him. Apostolopoulos had mailed in a bid for an 80,000-seat NFL stadium on 127 acres of land outside Detroit, a bid of $550,000, and then gone on vacation and moved on with his life. The auction came. Nobody else wanted it at that price. The auctioneer opened the phone bidding at $20 million. Not one taker. The price kept falling. And Apostolopoulos, who had genuinely forgotten he'd submitted anything, won it. With the auction house premium, the final total came to $583,000. It was a bit surprising, he told reporters. The city of Pontiac had been expecting $17 million. They received 3.5% of that. Only 4 bids were submitted in total. 4 bids for a building that had once hosted the Super Bowl, a papal mass, and the biggest night in professional wrestling history. A building that Engineering News Record magazine had called, without irony, one of the great design and construction achievements of our time. It sold for less than the price of a house in the suburbs it was supposed to revitalize. The city's path to that auction didn't start in 2009. The Detroit Lions had been playing at Tiger Stadium since 1941. Tiger Stadium was a baseball park, built for baseball and configured for baseball, and by the early 1960s, Lions ownership was done with it. Talk of a new stadium started in 1964 and dragged on for years. Downtown Detroit was considered the state fairgrounds. Walled Lake. Ooh. The riverfront. Every option came with complications. A Pontiac native named C. Don Davidson had a different proposal. He was a local high school athlete who had become an architecture professor at the University of Detroit. In the mid-1960s, he made the new stadium a class project, literally had his students study urban renewal options for Pontiac, with a sports complex at the center of the plan. He started his own weekly newspaper, the Pontiac Times, to promote the idea. He met with state officials, city officials, and William Clay Ford, the owner of the Detroit Lions. He pushed for years, and Pontiac wanted this. The city saw a stadium as an anchor, a reason for people to come out to Pontiac, a symbol the city could compete with Detroit. After years of debate, Pontiac was chosen over every other site. Davidson was hired as chief project designer. Original plans included a dual-purpose complex for football and baseball, potentially housing the Detroit Tigers as well. That was scrapped when the cost estimates arrived. Football only. Construction began on September 19, 1973. More than 2,500 trades workers representing 17 unions built the stadium. They moved 1.5 million cubic yards of dirt, poured 52,000 cubic yards of concrete, and set 1,700 tons of structural steel, all in 23 months, without a single work stoppage or overtime hour. A construction firm executive whose father worked the job described it as the biggest concrete project of his father's 40-year career. What made the construction itself unusual was the sequence. Builders started with the upper level of the stadium first, then dug downward, excavating the field and constructing the lower bowl from the inside out. The upper ring was completed while crews were still carving out the earth beneath it. It was an engineering approach as unconventional as the roof it was built to support. Barton Malo, the construction firm, would later hold the project up for decades as evidence of what the industry was capable of when everything went right. The roof was the design feature that set the Silverdome apart from every other professional sports facility built before it. Teflon-coated fiberglass panels held up entirely by air pressure, large hidden pumps inside the building kept the interior pressure just slightly above the exterior, which kept the fabric inflated and in place. No columns rising from the floor, no structural frame overhead, just pressurized air holding 82,000 square feet of fabric against the Michigan sky. It was the first time that technique had ever been used in a major athletic facility anywhere in the world. The roof was white from below. But from the air, at the right angle, sunlight hit the Teflon coating and reflected something that looked silver. People started calling it the Silverdome before it was ever officially named. In 1977, the name became official. The stadium opened on October 6, 1975. It seated over 82,000 people, the largest stadium in the NFL, a title it held until the year 2000. It had 102 luxury suites and 7,384 club seats. By every measure of the era, the state-of-the-art. The Detroit Pistons announced in September 1977 they were leaving downtown Detroit for the Silverdome. In January 1982, the stadium hosted Super Bowl XV, the first Super Bowl ever played in a cold-weather state. The Jehovah's Witnesses held their annual convention there every year from 1978 through 2004, drawing up to 40,000 people each time. The Michigan Panthers of the UCFL played there, along with college bowl games and state high school championships. Then there were the concerts. Led Zeppelin on April 30, 1977, in front of 76,229 people, a world record for a solo indoor attraction at the time. Michael Jackson in 1984, with bass notes so loud that his most familiar songs were nearly unintelligible inside the space. Bruce Springsteen and The Who both performed there. Billy Graham held a crusade there. On March 29, 1987, the WWF held WrestleMania II at the Silverdome, Hulk Hogan vs. Andre the Giant. The WWF announced an attendance of 93,173, which they claimed was the largest indoor live event crowd in North American history. That number has been disputed for decades. Wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer obtained internal accounting documents from local promoter Zane Bresloff showing the actual total was closer to 78,500. The discrepancy has never been officially resolved. What isn't disputed is that the building was functionally sold out and that the event generated an estimated $10 million in pay-per-view revenue alone, with nearly 1 million additional fans watching at 160 closed-circuit locations across North America. 6 months later, on September 19, 1987, Pope John Paul II celebrated Mass inside the Silverdome. The reported attendance was 93,682, the largest crowd the building ever officially recorded. In 1994, the Silverdome hosted first-round games of the FIFA World Cup, and because FIFA required natural grass, a team from Michigan State University developed a system to actually grow grass inside the dome. They built it. It worked. The first indoor World Cup match in history was played on natural turf, grown inside an air-pressurized fabric roof in Pontiac, Michigan. The roof design that made the Silverdome famous was also structurally vulnerable in ways that became clear early on. The first partial collapse came in August 1976, just 1 year after opening, during a thunderstorm. It was repaired and forgotten. Then came March 3, 1985. A late-season snowstorm dropped heavy, wet snow directly onto the Silverdome roof overnight. The next morning, Lions players were on the field for practice when 7 panels of the roof fabric tore simultaneously. Wet snow poured through onto the field. Concrete from the upper deck broke loose and crushed rows of seats. By pure luck, no one was in those sections. Repairs cost $8 million and took months. The Pistons had to relocate for the rest of that season. Engineers installed a reinforced replacement and said the problem was resolved. The roof would fail again in 2013. By the mid-1990s, Lions ownership had decided to leave. The roof problems were one part of it. The bigger part was money. The amenities that had been revolutionary in 1975 were no longer competitive. Newer NFL stadiums offered better revenue streams, better sight lines, more premium options. A lot of the money the Silverdome generated went straight back to servicing the building's accumulated debt, leaving little for upgrades. When the Detroit Tigers announced they were building a new ballpark downtown, the Lions made their decision. They were going back to the city. The split was not clean. When the Lions tried to exit their lease early, the city sued them. By November 2001, things had deteriorated to the point that when the Lions showed up for a practice session, city workers responded by blasting music over the stadium's sound system and running the air pumps at full power, deliberately creating enough wind inside the building to make practice impossible. The Lions played their last game at the Silverdome at the end of the 2001 season and moved to Ford Field in downtown Detroit in 2002. The Pistons had already been gone since 1988. Pontiac was left alone with a building it could not afford and had no plan to replace. From 2002 through 2009, the stadium sat empty. The city was spending $1.5 million annually just to keep the stadium minimally secure and maintained. No events, no income, just a building that kept sending bills. Pontiac was already in serious financial distress. The long decline of American manufacturing had been hollowing out the city for decades. General Motors had literally built its Pontiac brand of cars in this city. The city was named for the division. When GM's fortunes declined and the auto industry contracted, Pontiac contracted with it. Losing the Lions removed the one consistent source of revenue, attention, and identity the city had managed to hold on to through all of that. By the time the stadium went to auction, Pontiac was operating under a state-appointed emergency financial manager. The city had effectively lost control of its own finances. Every bill, every contract, every major decision required sign-off from someone appointed by the state of Michigan, not elected by the people of Pontiac. In early 2008, a company called United Assurance Company, Limited, offered $18 million for the stadium. They had plans to redevelop it into an entertainment complex. The city turned it down. The decision was made to hold an open auction with no minimum bid required for an 82,000-seat stadium on 127 acres in the Detroit metropolitan area. When the auction was held in November 2009, only 4 bids came in. The opening ask over the phone was $20 million. Nobody moved. Apostolopoulos' forgotten bid, submitted weeks earlier with a $250,000 deposit check he'd included and then stopped thinking about, came in as the winner at $550,000. With the auction house fees, the final price was $583,000. Asked whether he thought it was a steal, Apostolopoulos said, "Not really. This is the type of deal where it's not what you pay for it, it's what you will need to pay to fix it up." Apostolopoulos had emigrated from Greece to Toronto in 1969 at 17 years old. He'd pulled apart chickens at a food processing factory, driven taxis, worked as an electrician's apprentice, built a cleaning business, then a manufacturing company, then a real estate portfolio focused entirely on distressed properties in struggling cities. By 2017, Canadian Business Magazine listed the Apostolopoulos family as the 22nd richest in Canada, with assets of $3.9 billion. His philosophy, by all accounts, was to acquire what everyone else had given up on, in places everyone else had written off. Pontiac fit that model precisely. Under his company Triple Sports and Entertainment, the Silverdome reopened on April 17, 2010, with a monster truck show. AC Milan played Panathinaikos FC in an exhibition soccer match that August. Boxing matches and concerts followed. Apostolopoulos invested approximately $6 million trying to bring the building back. But the math never worked. A stadium built for 80,000 looks and feels abandoned, with 12,000 in it. Every event held there was a reminder of how many seats were empty. And without a permanent major league anchor, which was never coming to Pontiac, there was no path to viability. In January 2013, another heavy snowstorm hit. The roof tore again. The same fundamental design, the same fundamental vulnerability. Apostolopoulos couldn't find a company capable of repairing it at a viable cost. By the end of 2013, the Silverdome was permanently closed. The remaining roof fabric deflated in 2014. Moss grew across concrete floors. Water pooled on the turf. The luxury suites that had once housed corporate executives on game days sat open to the elements, their fixtures corroding, their walls peeling. The scoreboard, which had tracked Lions scores and Pistons stats and World Cup results, went dark and stayed dark. The seats where 90-some thousand people had watched a papal mass were still there, in rows, facing a field that was now open to rain and snow and whatever Michigan winter decided to send through the gaps in what remained of the roof. In 2015, Red Bull filmed a BMX rider performing tricks off the luxury box railings down onto the field, a promotional video shot inside a decaying NFL stadium like it was a skate park. The same year, a drag racing event in the old parking lot launched what became the annual Woodward Dream Cruise. In February 2017, the city of Pontiac sued Triple Properties for building code violations and illegal vehicle storage on the property. Oakland County, separately, included the Silverdome site in its pitch to Amazon for the company's second headquarters. Demolition was scheduled for December 3, 2017. Former Lions players gathered in the parking lot. Television cameras from local and national outlets were set up before dawn. The charges detonated at 8:30 in the morning. Smoke rose from the structure. The Silverdome did not fall. 10 charges had failed to fire. A wiring problem. 8 charges had disconnected, and without them, the structural steel ring that had held the roof up for 42 years refused to fall. An Adamo Group executive told reporters, "We had a lot of difficulty getting people out of here the other night. We don't know if someone accidentally pulled the wire off." City officials said, "We just have to wait and let gravity do its job." A sports radio host tweeted that Barry Sanders was personally holding up the steel beams. Someone else posted, "Once again, angry people leave the Silverdome after a disappointing ending." The Washington Post covered it. NPR ran the audio. For one morning, the building everyone had written off became the most discussed structure in America by refusing to come down. The second attempt, the following day, worked. The ring fell. Hydraulic excavators handled the rest over the following months. The last standing wall came down in late March 2018. The total demolition cost was $8 million, 14 times what Apostolopoulos paid to buy the building. In September 2019, Amazon announced it would develop the site. A 3.7 million square foot distribution and delivery center now occupies the land where the Silverdome stood. The city says the facility employs around 4,000 people. Andreas Apostolopoulos died on February 15, 2021, at 69 years old. His son Peter said, "My father turned down a lot of offers for the Silverdome, including a waste transfer station, until he found one that was good for the community." The family has never disclosed the financial terms of their arrangement with Amazon. What is known is that they paid $583,000 for the land, spent roughly $6 million operating it, and $8 million demolishing it. Whatever they received for 127 acres with a 3.7 million square foot Amazon facility on it, it wasn't nothing. The city of Pontiac spent $55.7 million in 1975 to build a stadium, a figure worth approximately $220 million in 2009 dollars. They built it to attract the Lions. The Lions played there for 27 years and left for a better deal. The Pistons left after 13 years. Every other tenant came and went. The city was left with a building that cost $1.5 million a year just to maintain empty. They couldn't find a buyer at fair value. They turned down $18 million in 2008, a real offer from a real company with a real plan, and then held an open auction with no minimum bid and watched it produce $583,000. The new owner invested $6 million trying to make it work, failed, and then it cost $8 million more, 14 times the purchase price, just to tear it down. And today, on the land where the Super Bowl was played, where a pope held mass, where whatever number of people watched Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant once stood, Pontiac never fully recovered from the financial crisis that was underway when all of this happened. The emergency financial manager who approved the auction was part of a broader state intervention that continued for years afterward. One Amazon distribution center, whatever jobs it provides, doesn't address the structural economic damage a city absorbs when it builds a $55 million public asset, watches the tenant walk, and gets $583,000 back. The Silverdome was built without a work stoppage in 23 months. It held the largest crowds in NFL history. It hosted events that people still argue about decades later. Engineers called it one of the great achievements of its era. And when demolition crews finally set off the charges, it didn't fall on the first try. The whole country laughed for a day. Nobody mentioned the 55 million. Nobody mentioned the 18 million that got turned down. Nobody mentioned that a city received $583,000 for a building that cost $220 million in today's money. Because that part isn't funny. That part is just what keeps happening. City after city, stadium after stadium, every time a team decides it's ready to move on and leaves the bill with the people who can least afford it. The Silverdome is gone. Amazon's there now. And the public money that built it, $55 million in 1975, worth $220 million today, was never recovered. The man who bought the whole thing for $583,000 forgot he'd even placed the bid. That's not the surprising part. The surprising part is that the city let it happen.